Hello, I am Jackie, and you are listening to Jackie Teaches English. This podcast is designed to help English learners improve their listening skills, gain new vocabulary, and learn more about the English-speaking world. Want to read along with the audio? Go to JackieTeachesEnglish.com, where you will find a transcript of this episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. To be or not to be? That is the question. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. All that glitters is not gold. This is but a small selection of some of the beautiful lines of the English-speaking world's most famous playwright, William Shakespeare. As an intermediate or advanced learner of English, you will have certainly come across him. You may have even read or seen some of his plays, or watched a modern retelling of his classic tales. The very language that you are learning has been so influenced by his writing that it is very likely that you have heard or even used some of his words and phrases, possibly without knowing it. In this episode, we will discover the life and career of England's most famous bard, a general term for a poet and storyteller, looking at his ongoing legacy and his influence on the English language. We'll finish up by looking at a selection of phrases and expressions that Shakespeare invented that are still commonly used today. William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, a market town in England between London and Birmingham. You can actually visit the family house that Shakespeare was born in and lived in until the age of 18. This tourist attraction alone has made the sleepy town of Stratford-upon-Avon the second most visited place in the UK, after London. Even after all this time, the bard can still draw a crowd. William's father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker and worked out of the very same house that the family lived in, but he was also an important figure in the town, fulfilling civic duties. This gave the family an elevated and respected status, and it is very likely that William would have been sent to the local grammar school. At the age of 18, William had what is known as a shotgun marriage to Anne Hathaway, not the actress from The Devil Wears Prada and Interstellar, by the way. Anne, who was 26 at the time, was already pregnant, hence the need for a rushed marriage. I used the term shotgun wedding earlier, which refers to a quickly arranged marriage due to a pregnancy. The term comes from the threat of a shotgun, perhaps wielded by the bride's father to pressure the groom into marrying the bride. Nowadays, it's simply a figurative saying, although I wouldn't put it past some fathers in my home state of Texas. In any case, William and Anne had 3 children in total. Susanna was born just 6 months after the wedding, shocker, and was followed by twins Hamnet and Judith. Sadly, Hamnet died when he was just 11 years old. The beginnings of William's career as a playwright are murky at best. Murky simply means unclear or vague. Murky water is water that you can't really see through very well. Many historians call the period between 1585, when his twins were baptized, and 1592, when he achieved a literary reputation, as the lost years, because we simply don't have records that account for his activity during this time. In London, he became a founding member of a company of actors called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Shakespeare wrote 2 plays a year for the company and remained with them through the entirety of his career, which spanned nearly 20 years. The verb span can be used to describe the length of time for which something lasts. Shakespeare's time with the theatre troupe spanned almost 20 years. It was during this time that Shakespeare produced some of his most well-known plays, including King Lear, Macbeth, and The Tempest. Shakespeare enjoyed the patronage, which refers to the financial aid and support of many of London's finest, including most famously, Queen Elizabeth I herself. And if you've been to London, you may have visited the Globe, a modern reconstruction of the Bard's Theatre. The original Globe Theatre was finished and opened in 1599 by Shakespeare's acting company. It had 20 sides, which gave it a circular shape, and it held 3,000 people. Shakespeare's plays that were performed at the Globe included Henry V, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Othello, and many, many more. Sadly, during the performance of Henry VIII on the 29th of June, 1613, a cannon shot at the end of Act 1 set fire to the thatched roof, and the theatre burned down within an hour. The theatre would be rebuilt, but then later forced to shut for good in 1642, when Parliament ordered the closure of all London theatres. Why? This was partially due to the English Civil War starting and a very anti-theatre attitude by the governing Puritans. Theatres were seen as centers of immorality and disorder. Basically, they were a bunch of fuddy-duddies. A fuddy-duddy is a slang term for someone who is no fun, old-fashioned in their thinking, and very, very fussy. I'm going to go ahead and say it. The Puritans were fuddy-duddies. You would definitely not want to invite them to a dinner party. But let's return to the main man, William Shakespeare. He had a very successful career, writing 38 plays, 154 sonnets, and a variety of poems. Due to the success of his plays, he became very wealthy and was able to purchase the largest house in Stratford-upon-Avon, called New Place. Records show that he split his time between London and Stratford, which back in those days was a 2 to 3 day commute. William Shakespeare died in 1616 at the age of 52. It is thought that he died on the same day he was born, on the 23rd of April. We don't know the cause of death, but he was buried at the Holy Trinity Parish Church in Stratford, and you can visit his grave and monument, which is still standing today. 7 years after William's death, 2 of his friends created a collection of 36 of his works, and the first folio was published in 1623. Without this immense project, truly a labor of love by his friends, half of Shakespeare's plays would have been lost to us today. It is thought that between 750 and 1,000 copies were printed, and we are lucky that 230 of these have survived. Now that we know a little more about the man behind the plume, a word for a large feather which served as writing quills in Shakespeare's time, let me give you a taste of some of Shakespeare's most loved works and see if I can entice you to read one, or even better, see one performed if you haven't already. I would recommend starting with Romeo and Juliet, as you are probably already familiar with the story. It has been retold so many times, from the musical West Side Story to Taylor Swift's song Love Story. It's all about boy meets girl, a forbidden love, star-crossed lovers, and the tragedy that comes after. You can watch the 1996 film Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by Baz Luhrmann, or my favorite, although it is a bit older, the 1968 film directed by Franco Zeffirelli. It is beautiful. If you're not into all that sappy love language, then I recommend Hamlet. A dark tragedy, Hamlet tells the tale of a son who seeks revenge against his uncle for murdering his father in order to take the throne and marry his mother. It is Shakespeare's longest play, so not for the faint-hearted, which means those lacking courage or resolution. However, you can enjoy Kenneth Branagh's 1996 adaptation. It's regarded as one of the best Shakespeare film adaptations ever made, and I highly recommend it. Or, if you fancy something a little more fantastical, why not try A Midsummer's Night Dream? A story of comedy, romance, and fairies set in an enchanted forest? What's not to like? This one is commonly performed and is considered one of Shakespeare's most accessible plays. If you do decide to try to read Shakespeare, just be prepared for the challenge. It is a difficult read for native speakers. His works are studied in high school and are taught with a lot of support and explanation. As with all things, though, no pain, no gain. Here are my top tips for reading Shakespeare as an advanced English student. First, remember that his plays were designed to be performed and watched, not read. Of course, the best place to see Shakespeare is on a stage, but this may be difficult to find in the original English unless you're living in an English-speaking country. If you can, start by watching a film adaptation with subtitles in your native language. Get a general idea of the setting, characters, and plot. Visuals and context can really help us make sense of his poetic and archaic language. Secondly, get a sneak peek by reading a synopsis of each scene before you try to read it. You want to be able to enjoy the drama as the story unfolds, so if you have an idea about what is coming, this will ease you in. Thirdly, I highly recommend reading along with an audiobook. Why? Because you'll be able to enjoy the rich sounds and rhythm of Shakespearean language so much better coming from a trained voice actor and narrator. You'll be coming across plenty of unusual and new words as well, so you won't have to guess at the pronunciation. I hope that I've convinced some of you to have a go at reading or watching Shakespeare, if you haven't before. However, even if you never read a line of Shakespeare in your life, I can guarantee that you will come across words and expressions in the English language that came from the bard. There are honestly so many that I would never be able to fit them all into one episode, but let me pick out some of my favorites. First, if you find yourself in a difficult situation, you can say that you are in a pickle, which originated in Shakespeare's The Tempest. Although its original meaning was to be drunk, the meaning has since shifted to just be in some bother or difficulty. If you are jealous of someone, you might be described as green-eyed. Shakespeare used the phrase, a green-eyed monster, in Othello. Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster. Third, people who show their emotions and allow themselves to be vulnerable with others wear their heart upon their sleeves, also from Othello. And at a dinner party full of strangers, it might be a little awkward and uncomfortable at first. You can break the ice by playing a game or coming up with a fun topic of conversation. We now even say that something is a good icebreaker if it reduces that initial awkward tension in a social setting. Well, that's from Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. And finally, we often say that something is the be-all, end-all when it's the most important thing or the main reason of something. For example, John acts like making money is the be-all, end-all of his existence, but that's just wrong. The original phrase, the be-all and the end-all, came from Shakespeare's Macbeth. These are just 5 examples, but there are so many more. You can find more information about Shakespeare's influences on the English language by exploring some additional websites that I will link on this podcast episode page on my website. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my podcast, and I hope that you enjoyed finding out more about England's most famous and influential playwright. If it has encouraged you to explore his works, then I am very glad. For that is surely one of the best things about learning another language, being able to access and appreciate another culture, including its literature. Remember that you can access the annotated transcript with vocabulary notes for this episode on my website, JackieTeachesEnglish.com, where you can also find my blog and information about online English lessons. I'd love to help you take your English to the next level. And if you found this episode useful, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. I'll leave you now with a line from Romeo and Juliet to say goodbye. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Take care. Bye.